Hello everyone, my name is Moji. You're watching a Bitcoin Bubble news channel. The amount of money that is speculated on Bitcoin as a financial asset will grow by a huge amount over the next few years. You can't make more Bitcoin, so it's the only way to invest. Never, ever. That's why you should try to get as much as you can while you still can. The best thing about Bitcoin is that no one runs it. I'll be the first to say this: you pay me to run the business. This is what makes Bitcoin such a pure and beautiful purchase. This is also why governments should be able to invest in Bitcoin. No one owns it. It's just supply and demand, or how the market feels. A lot of people forget about this, and to use a bad word, let's say if they compare Bitcoin to things like gold, silver, and other goods that don't run out. You can't make more Bitcoin, so it's the only way to invest. Okay. At any time. At any time. That's why you should try to get as much as you can while you still can. Because if Bitcoin is going to zero, it doesn't matter who does the work. My mining business is going out of business anyway. That being said, why shouldn't I try to have as much Bitcoin as I can? The price of Bitcoin will only go up if the US government and other sovereigns decide to hold and buy Bitcoin. This will make my balance sheet stronger and stronger. Fred Thiel, head of Marathon Digital, a major Bitcoin mining company, talks about how Bitcoin can be used and what the future holds for it, especially when it comes to big businesses adopting it. In this video, Fred talks about the huge potential of pension funds which are currently doing their research and getting ready to put a big chunk of their money into Bitcoin. Without a doubt, this will have a big effect on the price of Bitcoin. As we show you more of this interview, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and set your post alerts to get more videos like this. Share your thoughts and comments below to join the discussion. Every contact with the channel helps the YouTube algorithm and makes it bigger. These kinds of groups are now realizing that Bitcoin does have a track record of over time getting more valuable over time. Also, why not have it? Now there are easy ways for them to hold it. With the ETFs, you can also see the start of some institutional investment. But it's not too late yet, because most of the big wirehouses, like Merrill Lynch, still haven't given these ETFs the green light. Until then, though, and from what I know, a lot of them are already in the process. It will take 6 to 9 months. But you have more than $40 trillion in pension money sitting there, even if it's a year from now. Plus, I've always thought that a 1% limit would be crazy. But when I talk to some of the managers at these big banks who work with these pension funds, I asked them what the funds said they would do with their money. I'm told it's between 2% and 4%. That's a very large amount. That brings me back to the idea that it makes sense to have a lot of Bitcoin, because other people will also want to have a lot of Bitcoin. As the amount of Bitcoin in ETFs rises, and you consider how many small buyers there are, bad news: stock markets drop. The Nasdaq, S&P 500, or any other index drops 10%. The open market is still not very active, even if they all decide to sell 10% of their Bitcoin holdings at the same time. That's why you'll probably see a bigger drop when there is one. And the OTC desk might not be able to handle that much traffic. People need to be very careful about how they look at the markets, because when too much Bitcoin is held by a few hands, things can go very badly when those hands decide to move in the next 6 to 12 months. I think a lot of interesting things will happen. There will be a lot of derivative financial products that will let people trade risk and hedge risk in the same ways that they can trade other commodities. There are many ways to lower your risk in the oil business. This is something we'll see more and more of with Bitcoin as a way to make the market much more open. Because think that in the future, the US government owns 2 million Bitcoin, which is 10% of all the Bitcoin that are out there. People from Saudi Arabia, Russia, China, India, and other places decide to own a total of 20%. And that means 30% of all the Bitcoin in the world is no longer for sale. You could say that at least 70%, or about 4 million Bitcoin of the keys, are lost. Like Satoshi's bank and such, right? That's another 20% or so. Now you have 50% of the Bitcoin locked up. Then, through the ETFs, which are already at 1% or 2%, and the MicroStrategy, which is at 1% and rising. Now you're kind of at 60%. The market doesn't have a lot of money in it. So either you get in now or things will get harder, and there will be a huge demand on the market for these derivative products. Because of this, the amount of money that is speculated on Bitcoin as a financial asset will grow by a huge amount over the next few years. Bitcoin only trades based on how much people think it's worth and how scarce it is. That's it. Because of this, it's a much more honest way to spend. Yes, Bitcoin is 2 times more volatile than the SP or the Nasdaq. Look at how it moves. But look at how quickly it comes back, right? If Tesla's earnings are bad, the stock will go down. You'll probably have to wait until the next earnings report before the stock starts to rise again. The price of Bitcoin went down and then back up after MT. Stocks or the German government sold all of it a few weeks ago. When the price of Bitcoin went down, a lot of it came into the market. That Bitcoin was quickly bought back and the price went back up. In that case, it shows how much people want Bitcoin. And that shows how healthy the Bitcoin market is right now. I also think that the idea of these cycles that we've had before 4-year cycles will fail and the mines will give up. The miners don't have much of an effect on the price of Bitcoin right now. All they do is hold a lot of Bitcoin and sell it. But the amount of Bitcoin that miners make every day and sell on the market is disappearing faster than it can be replaced. So now it's just supply and demand. And the best thing about Bitcoin is that if you buy Marathon stock, you're putting in the management team and my ability to run the business. Okay, I'll say it first. It's not run by anyone. This is what makes Bitcoin such a pure and beautiful purchase. This is also the reason why states should be able to invest in Bitcoin. Because no one is in charge of it. It's just supply and demand or how the market feels. Does it seem possible that the United States will reach a point where we have a national Bitcoin bank? If that's the case, do you think that other countries would use the same plan? Of course. The US has more gold than any other country in the world. There is no gold behind the dollar. But gold gives the US a way to show its power in the global markets. Gold is also held as a backup by other countries. Additionally, it was having gold that led Nixon to separate the dollar from gold. Other countries were pulling their gold out of the US system because they saw how much the US was spending and thought it would go bankrupt. The US government has a lot of gold. With about 28% of the land in the country, they own the most land in the country. And not long ago, the petrodollar agreement came to an end. Under this agreement, producers of commodities would price their goods in dollars in return for us protection, and then they would invest the dollars in the US. That is no longer there. So the US has become less important as a reserve currency, and it's now less than 50% less valuable as an asset to keep. China no longer buys bonds but gold instead. Japan was one of the biggest buyers of US bonds when they were having money problems, but they are now buying less as well. It's funny that Tether is one of the biggest users of short-term treasury bills. They buy at the level of a country-state and are the 6th biggest buyer. What a twist. So the US has to find a way to pay its debt. That is a dangerous situation if people don't buy dollars or put things in dollars. So the value of the dollar drops a lot and inflation is high, so they can pay off their debt. But that would be terrible. Another thing they can do is put their money into something like Bitcoin that will grow in value over time. That is, if it can rise in value faster than the overall US debt, you will have something to use to balance it out over time. Suppose the US held 2 million Bitcoins. If those Bitcoins went up in value to $20 million over the next 10, 20, or 30 years, the US would suddenly hold $20 million worth of Bitcoins, which is more than $40 trillion. Well, the government